Hello, my good people. Welcome to North of America. My name is Kevin Bowers. So glad you're here. Today, I want to talk about Extinction Rebellion. These people in the UK have been inspiring millions of people. And it's interesting, in North of America, they don't get quite the same attention that some other movements like Greta brings to the climate crisis that we're in. But Extinction Rebellion deserves a lot of respect and attention, and so I want to pump them up. That's the job here of North of America, to sort of crank up the volume on any people that are debunking orthodoxies, and sort of creating awareness and insight and to our present political ecological situation. So they're doing great guns there. They have three demands that I think are really interesting and we can learn a lot from. The first, you have probably heard a little bit about, is that they want to declare a climate emergency, specifically in the UK government, but it's kind of spread to the world. Here in Canada we have done this, called for a climate emergency. I believe in the States they did the same thing, and in the UK as well. And sure enough, we're used to words having very little meaning in this sort of media political landscape. So we got this wee victory after only what was it, like a week or so of protests. They shut down London and various other places in the UK, and in pretty short order got the political class to agree to a climate emergency. Interestingly, the Conservative government in the UK refused to vote, and I think similarly the Conservatives or the Republicans sort of abstained in some way as well, and the US and the UK got these votes passed. But the UK is not naive, and they understand that these words will be about as meaningless as, I don't know, maybe a climate protocol agreement, right? So there's some fear and trepidation about the weight that a climate emergency has. So clearly they're not done yet, and they are going to be endlessly persistent because they know the situation. So their second demand, after getting a climate emergency, is to act upon that emergency. Act like your house is on fire. Thanks, Greta, once again. And get quite specific about how to do that. They asked for something called citizens' assemblies, which is a fairly new concept. Certainly in North America, we don't hear about this idea very much, but it is a great idea where you get, I don't know, it's like picking a jury, and you get like 1,000 people, and you give them the task of figuring out how to best arrive at the third request of Extinction Rebellion, which is to get to net zero carbon by 2025. So how are we going to do that? Extinction Rebellion is not going to tell you what they are going to say, and what they are going to demand is that a democratic process is put together that fulfills that promise and uses the technologies and the strategies that are offered to the Citizens' Assembly to come up with a way of doing it, to make sure that all areas of the economy, all sectors, all races, religions, yada yada, get sort of into the say, get to have a say in how we arrive at this zero carbon. So all that's pretty interesting to me. And congratulations to the incredible effect that it has had. They studied how protests have been effective in the past. They did some research into why nonviolence was important, and why disruption, and specifically of capital cities. Disruption of capital cities in a nonviolent manner were the most effective way of getting political change, and they did this, by studying historical precedent. So this makes sense to me. Using reason and historical evidence is a way to move forward. Again, Thank you, Extinction Rebellion, for doing the good works. Here at North of America, though, I did want to spend a little bit of time talking about the media's response to Extinction Rebellion, and I think it's important that we see the ways in which the media is going to attempt to undermine, obfuscate the message, and you can be sure that they are working overtime, trying to dilute and turn our attention away from climate collapse. And sure enough, they are. So I've watched a number of interviews, and they all end up kind of the same, which is an important observation insofar, they're the palette with which they can attack Extinction Rebellion and people with such a noble cause. The palette's pretty restrained, right? There's not many things you can say to someone who's trying to save the planet to make them look bad and you look good. But they are trying. So the one that I always see, and I certainly saw this on BBC, and I probably saw it on some others. But the question inevitably comes to the organizer of Extinction Rebellion, something to the effect of, how do you expect to be successful when you are shutting down streets and, my goodness, there are hard-working, good-natured Londoners who are trying to get to work, and you are impeding and inconveniencing their day? How do you expect to be successful when you're pissing off the very people you're looking to help? So when I hear that, I get a bit of outrage. I get a bit incensed. Partially because I'm afraid it's a really lame thing to say when you dig into it. On the surface, I think to the average viewer to whom I hold no animus, it sounds like a reasonable thing. Yeah, you are pissing people off. Yeah, okay. Anyways, I've seen some responses by the Extinction Rebellion people are good, and sometimes I think they could do better as they're confronting this sort of narcissistic question, this obfuscation that they're trying to pull. The first one, and I have seen some Extinction Rebellion people pulling this off. It seems like, incredibly obvious, which is funny you ask me that, because here I am on the BBC speaking to you now, and in between your attempts to try to distract the conversation and to disinform your viewers, I've been able to get 6-7 minutes of my narrative onto the airwaves, that we have a existential crisis, that we are in the middle of a collapse of our economies and our ecosystems that are desperate and important. And up until the rebellion, I wasn't given any time on BBC or Sky News or whatever it might be. So the tactic has worked. Because my presence is in front of your face right now. So, the fuckery of the question is so easily dismissed on that first retort. But I got a few others that I want to point to. One is, the question is so inane because it's as if you're asking me to believe that this disobedience, this rebellion, is really targeted at the people that happen to be driving around this neighborhood at this hour in London. That was my target audience, the people that I'm pissing off in my car. That's ridiculous, but it's implicit in your question. I'm pissing off some guy who wants to get, to dinner. And, I get it, man. That sucks. But that wasn't the guy that I was necessarily targeting. I'm targeting the entire, English-speaking world, and then I could focus in on the UK electorate, I guess. And I'm trying to raise their consciousness to the baffling existential crisis in which they are in. I'd love it if the person in the car, if she decides, you know what, this rebellion is really important, I'm going to get out of my car and I'm going to join the strike. But let's be honest, you and I both know that they were not the target of my rebellion. And that your question is so easily derailed by that mere fact shows that it wasn't really a question at all. It wasn't a serious inquiry into its tactics. What it was an attempt to obfuscate and distract, which is embarrassing for the media. And I hope, that we can sort of use this leverage and this sort of play that the BBC makes, because they sort of commit, right, with this big sort of meaty fist as they try to punch at the rebellion, and they expose themselves with all of that momentum. And if we're wily enough, we can see its stupidity. We can see the attempted obfuscation. We can see the flack that they're spewing into the air and the fog that they're trying to disguise rationality with. And if we can see the deceit, then we needn't be lured by it. So that's one of the things here in North America that I'd like to accomplish. Giving people the confidence to recognize shit and to call it for what it is so that it doesn't distract us. And the BBC has played its hand when they ask that stupid question. That they are willing to, or let's say that they are such a willing tool in the shed of oligarchs and of the oil industry that they will throw away their own integrity, and as they throw the lives of 100 million people under the bus of climate collapse. I mean, it's a shameful game, right? And we should be meeting that media fuckery with that much disdain and disgust. That's what you're doing. You're asking questions that are on their, with a little bit of reverse engineering, you can see the stupidity of the question and you can see its intent, which discredits the speaker and the network that they are on as frauds. Dangerous, criminal frauds. So, that's a thing. Yeah, and one other play, when I think about that question, like you're inconveniencing this worker, so, how do you expect this protest to work? Well, let's talk about inconvenience for a second, shall we? Let's put out some scales. Okay, so we have these scales here, and on the left we have, let's say, the cab driver who loses some wage due to the strike in London, the rebellion. And then you could add to that, some people that are just, inconvenienced because they're stuck in a traffic jam and they couldn't get to their, the dinner party or whatever. And it's frustrating. It's a pain in the ass. I get it. So that's real, and it's, it's somewhat regrettable. And Extinction Rebellion is very clear on this. They insist on politeness, and but they also say that we need to, create a bit of turmoil, change the world. Okay, so that's the left hand. It's got some, regrettable inconvenience. Let's look at the counterweight over here. So what could we place on there? Let's say we could place the largest death toll in human history in the next 100, 150 years. And let's remember that is comes from us to us from our best science. Predictably, if we continue doing what we're doing today, if the BBC is, or any newscast, of course I'm just lumping them in with the rest, but if they are successful in distracting and obfuscating enough that we do exactly what we're doing now, which is nothing, and keeping our pension plans invested in carbon, and we just move forward. The best science we have looks at 4 to 6 degrees of warming in the next, in this century. And that number seems gentle enough. It breaks our ability to see the calamity. We can no longer model what that climate would look like. And the ideas that we do have about it are devastating. Hundreds of millions of people displaced, diseases, crop failure, wheat, rice, and corn failures across the planet, starvation, disease. Anyway, so that's, I'm piling these on here as the inconveniences that humanity will face. The taxi driver and his regrettable lost wage, or the very clear and present calamity that presents itself. I mean, it's shameful. It's a conversation that's sort of embarrassing to have because it's so extreme and kind of obvious. So here in North of America, I would like to tip a hat to Extinction Rebellion and for the fine work that they do. I have some other things to say about Extinction Rebellion. But perhaps that's for another video because they're too important to try to slam into one video, and my thoughts are tangential. So, anyways, thanks so much for coming to North of America. Keep in touch. Please subscribe, share with your friends. I'm brand spanking new at doing this, folks. I don't have a great understanding of the Twitterverse. I'm trying to learn people. I've been on Reddit trying to figure that out. I think I pissed someone off on Reddit trying to post my stuff because I can't figure out what their culture is exactly. But I trust and respect the good people of the internet, and I know that what we're doing here is important, and I know this because I've seen other people do it and it's changed my life. So let's do what we got to do. Deep respect. Signing off from North of America.